All right, what's up, everyone? I am Ian, back again here with another episode of Bikes and Beers, and I'm joined by a friend here, Jake.
I'm the Triumph fanboy that got made fun of in the last episode, and let me tell you, when I heard that, I was grinning ear to ear during that part. I was like, "Oh, he's gonna make fun of me, isn't he?" And oh, there he goes. So
He was so upset that he had to jump on the show and defend his honor. Talk about how great triumphs
mess
are.
with my, you mess with my Triumphs, you get the knife. Bikes and beer, two things near and dear to my heart. Basically, bikes, beer, and dogs, and any combination of at least two of those three. Dogs and motorcycles. Haven't quite figured that one out yet. Maybe a sidecar. Maybe I haven't figured that out. Dogs and beer, absolutely. My dog goes to the brewery with me all the time. Bikes and beer. Well, I don't like to ride and drink, but I certainly like to wrench and drink.
Yes, that's a
And
rule.
I can certainly talk about bikes all day long.
Yes, that's basically
Yeah.
we have a group chat with a few other guys in it, and we basically just spend our days talking. When we get tired of
Mostly
doing work.
mocking one another.
Mostly mocking one another and talking crap on
And
bikes.
our lack thereof of mechanical ability.
Have you tried smacking it with a
Which usually
hammer?
ends up with us. I have. Usually ends with us whining to this one guy who's like an engineer. But how do I fix
Yeah.
this? Mike, come help me.
And then you'll just say something like, it's funny because he's like the most mechanically adept, but he also has the worst advice. Like I had this like dented, beat to hell gas tank, and he was just like, "I just put stickers on it. It'll be fine."
He's okay. He's okay living in the margin, in the in between. The guy to pick on him a little bit. I don't know if he'll listen to this one or not, but the guy does have some questionable taste. I mean, keeping a '96 Land Rover Discovery alive, even though it's left him stranded a half dozen times, like over 10 years. So it does sound like a bit of a there's some judgment going on there. I would have let it go a long time ago for a Land Cruiser.
I think there's some like Dunning-Kruger effect going on with mechanics in general, because we could fix stuff, but we also get stranded the most.
That is true.
What are you drinking on today?
Today, well, I have it poured in a glass, but I brought a can over just so I would also have a second beer. This is from a local brewery to me. They have been contract brewing for a while, but they're actually about to open up a location that they are advertising that you can take your boat to, because it's right on the water. A place called Ross Brewing Company, Virtual Learning. It's a double dry hopped New England style IPA. Very juicy, very citrusy, very hazy. Delicious.
Nice. That's a lot more notes than I'm gonna be able to pull. In a
Budweiser.
in a move that's complete heresy, I'm actually drinking whiskey right now.
Oh, well, if I had known it was going to be whiskey, I did have a very good bourbon that I could have poured. I could have sat in my easy chair next to my
Just
globe.
sat there. Yeah, and I could have
Yeah,
admired it from afar.
But anyway, I am joining you one night before my first inaugural trip of this year, which I guess I do multiple big trips a year, but this is my first big trip of 2021. Tomorrow morning, I'll be waking up bright and early, getting on my I have a 2015 Yamaha FJ09 sport touring bike, so with a big triple, all loaded up, saddlebags ready to go. Riding over to Morgantown, West Virginia. I'm in New Jersey. A friend of mine will be joining me from Kentucky. It's our nice little halfway point. And then we'll be doing a trip kind of meandering down through the mountains, down into the Smokies. We're going to hit up the Devil's Triangle, Brushy Mountain Distillery, the Tail of the Dragon, the Charhola Skyway, all the weird little roads that are around that area. I'm trying to convince him to let me go to Dollywood, but we'll see. As well as the Back of the Dragon, and then up kind of along the Blue Ridge Parkway, the Virginia side of the Appalachians. So nice little 5-day trip. Very excited.
Sounds really fun. Yeah. Well, how was the? We were gonna touch on, because I've never really gone on a long tour. I've done quite a few many miles of ripping around town, but never anything in a long straight line. So what would you say to someone who's looking to get into some distance touring?
Get ready to be uncomfortable. Get ready to push your limits, but get ready to have a lot of fun. I mean, I fell in love with it. I think my first or second year motorcycling. Started off just doing little trips from where I am in New Jersey up into like the Catskill Mountains in New York, camping out with friends. Started off with my Bonneville and a cheap, crappy pair of saddlebags, for $80, that, a tent. You got a good weekend there. You and the boys go drink some whiskey in the woods, build a big fire, try to find wood, and realize that there's no way to carry any kind of firewood on a motorcycle that isn't, at least a little bit sketchy. But I'd say just get out and do it. Be very flexible. You're gonna want to plan and over-plan things. Especially, I'm a little bit of a Type A personality. Like when I'm planning a trip, I need to know all the details, everything that's gonna happen, exactly where I'm going. And on a motorcycle trip, you can't do that at all. You have to, you may have ideas of getting to a particular destination on a single night, but you may not make it halfway there. Just you'll get rained out. A good example of this, and just of staying fluid, was in 2018. The first year I got my Yamaha FJ09. This was actually my first trip. On that bike, my friends and I were going up to Montreal, which isn't too bad of a trip from where I am in Jersey. It's about 6-7 hours, basically straight up north on the New York State Thruway. But we had this idea. I saw some list of this, coolest small towns in America. And I saw this one town, I think it was called Glens Falls, New York, kind of near like Lake George area. And I said, oh, look at all these cool breweries. Oh, look at these cool restaurants. Oh, this, cool downtown and everything like that. Like let's go there. Like, we have to go there. We left, got stuck in just dead stopped traffic on I think this was late June, so 90-degree temperature. My friend was on an air-cooled CB 750 from the 80s. And it's a great bike. We have a blood oath, him and I, about that bike. If he has to stop riding or if he dies, that it's not staying in his family. It's going to mine. But anyway, we got just absolutely just roasted the entire way there, stuck in traffic. His bike was overheating because he was bugging out that the low oil light was coming on, started to smoke and shimmer a little bit, and it kept dying on him actually. So I was like, dude, you're on a downhill, we're not moving much, just shut that engine off. Anyway, so we're just roasting, dying, absolutely killing ourselves. Get clear into New York, and then just get hit by these huge thunderstorms. So we were just 100% miserable. I actually took a video that day of me and my friends just sitting there at a gas station, just as just buckets of water come down on us. And we had this idea of we have to get to this town, It was still about 2 hours north of where we were. But in the sense of being agile, being flexible, I pulled out my cell phone, I took a look at it. Where are we on the map? Oh, look at that. Sarasota Springs. I've heard of that town. What have I heard about that town? No idea, but I've heard of it. Well, look at that. There's a nice hotel right in the downtown. Look at this. There's a brewery a block away that has, what looks like a great cheeseburger. And if I wasn't, after just that miserable day, was that hot shower not incredible? Sarasota Springs ended up being a great little town. Really cool little downtown. That's where they have one of the famous horse races is there every year. So good little downtown. And if that wasn't the best cheese, I still to this day think that is the best cheeseburger I've had in my life. Druthers Brewing Company, you can mark my words. I have no idea if it was because I was just miserable and hungry and exhausted, or if it actually was a great cheeseburger.
Probably both.
But beer was good. Partly a little column A, a little column B. So just absolutely staying flexible. Setting realistic goals. I mean, when I do a trip like this, I set an endpoint, and I figure out, okay, how do I get there? How do I get back? Make sure that I build in some wiggle room in between. In this case, our endpoint is the tail of the dragon. But between here and there, I mean, no idea. I mean, we've came up with a meetup point where we were going to meet up. We came up with an idea or two of generally where we're going to go, but weather, breakdowns, things like that can absolutely just completely change your itinerary. Breakdowns on a trip are sometimes very, very fun.
Mm-hmm.
You get really creative. That's another good topic.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, on that same trip as the Montreal trip, we ended up going to Montreal, had a great time, great city, incredible food, great beer scene too. And at least at the time, this was 2017. 2017, actually, it was right before our trip to Germany. It was a month before.
I remember that trip.
A month after our trip to Germany, I should say. We had a good time in Montreal. The exchange rate was super in our favor, so I just remember being doing the math, the conversion for Canadian dollars to American dollars, a nice sit down meal with two big really good craft beers, at not a fancy restaurant but a nice restaurant. Was I was doing the math and I'm this was $12. Take more of my money, please. With tip. And I was okay. But anyway, so we left from there and we were actually going to go to we were trying to get to Massachusetts for the 4th of July. We ended up on this trip. We did Canada Day, which is July 1st in Canada, and then we were trying to do 4th of July in America to go visit some friends of mine down there in Massachusetts. And my friend ended up having a small accident on his Suzuki V-Strom, completely breaking his shift lever.
Ooh.
Like the actual linkage, like the linkage itself was fine, but the lever itself just popped off. So we had to jerry rig something. I don't know exactly what it was, but it involved a wrench, a crescent wrench, and a lot of duct tape so that he could actually shift. I actually had to ride the bike for him for a little bit just to get the bike back to where he was. Um, yeah, had to get a little creative with that. Was able to ride that back. We're very flexible in our plans in that we were just kind of trying to limp it home. Basically, we had a lot of time. We decided, you know what, we're not going to be able to make it down to Massachusetts, further east. We're going to just kind of start heading straight home, and just nice and easy. Take our time getting home. We ended up in Burlington, Vermont, going to a big, we found like a mega dealer there that sold a lot of Suzukis, and we thought they might be able to, they might have the part in stock. Who knows? Roll in there, ask the guy, do you have this part in stock? He says, oh no, I don't. It'll be 2 weeks. And I said, hey, look, this is what's happening. We're travelers. This is our situation. Any chance you've got? So his bike, to just clarify, was a V-Strom 650, earlier generation than your brother's. However, this bike shares, tons of parts with the Suzuki SV650. For the audience's sake, a very similar bike, shares an engine, shares a transmission, shares a lot of parts. I said, any chance there's an SV650 on the floor? He says, yeah, somebody just traded one in like yesterday. Is it the same part? Oh, look at that. It's the same part number. So they end up, charging us for the used one the same price as a new one because they had to order a new one. But like this bike had literally just been taken in on a trade-in. Like they hadn't done any kind of reconditioning or anything like that, so they didn't care. Saved our trip. Managed to get back home. Managed to eat, in Burlington, home of Ben and Jerry's. Ice cream cone the size of my head, and had a great trip. So yeah, again, being flexible with your plans is really the best advice I can give anyone that wants to do kind of some long distance touring.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like a lot of fun. I find, I don't know where your perspective's on this, but I think a lot of the fun that I have on bikes is that you're very aware they're never like the right tool for the job. But so if you get stranded or whatever, if it's raining, it's like you have to deal with some crap. And a lot of times that's when I have the most fun. Is like you're just sort of toughing it out in some situation. You break down. You're like, oh, I guess I'm gonna go to a coffee shop, wait for the tow truck, or like rig up something.
See what I can fix with duct tape and some plucky attitude.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where a lot of the fun is to be had. You can't. I think that's probably what you're getting at. Is like you shouldn't be frustrated when stuff goes wrong. You should just kind of like enjoy the ride that is not getting home the way you wanted.
And honestly, it's the closest thing that you or I could get to, being Jeremy Clarkson and James May, Richard Hammond in the Top Gear special. You're improvising, you're adapting, you're seeing things you would never normally see. I honestly, anyone that rides, everybody ride your own ride, but at the very least, pick a pretty state park halfway across your state, go ride to it with some friends, camp out and have a good time. At least try it once.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd love to do that. I wanted to get that going this summer, and I may still. I was
with your bike that's a car.
Yes, with my PC 800.
With your PCH, yeah.
Yeah, like I still think that I could do that, but now I have a feeling it would be a much more interesting trip if I did take that bike.
I think so. I think honestly, just the looks you'll get along the way might be worth it. It is a. I'll tell you this, especially when you're getting to like big distance, like big tours. My first real big tour, as I mentioned, I did a bunch of little trips like upstate New York. 4 hours away from my house, maybe 5 hours away at the furthest. Had a ton of fun, but my first big multi-state tour, we definitely bit off more than we could chew. So at the time, it was me and the friends from the earlier stories with the Honda CB750 and the V-Strom. And at the time, I didn't have my FJ09. I had just my Triumph Bonneville, which, for the audience's sake, it's a 2007 Triumph Bonneville, 865cc parallel twin. It'll do highway, just not halfway across the continent. We rode from Jersey all the way to Nashville, and it took us a couple days to do so, mostly highway the entire time, but just was absolutely just punishing on our. We were young, we were dumb. I'm a bit of an older guy now, but we were young and 25, so you thought we were invincible. And just, I remember waking up on after our second night of riding. So the next day, like our third day of riding, waking up, I believe we were in Louisville, Kentucky. I remember waking up and like just looking at my bike and being like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just exhausted. I slept 8 hours the night before and had a big steak dinner in Louisville, but like, good Lord, I just don't want to do this anymore.
No amount of energy drinks will make this okay.
No. My friend Eric at the time he loves those 5-hour energies, and we were joking that he was running on 15 or 20-hour energy on a given day. And yeah, we ended up so that last day was an easy day. We took all back roads through Kentucky to get to Nashville, and Nashville we had guys trip in Nashville, so we took a couple days off the bikes, and just, general debauchery ensued. So that was good to get back on there. But from there we left and just took nothing but beautiful mountain back roads through eastern Tennessee into western North Carolina. We avoided the Tail of the Dragon, so we didn't think we were ready for it yet. But we did take the Blue Ridge Parkway and ended up in Asheville, North Carolina. And just going from just punishing 80 miles an hour, dodging tractor trailers on I-81 to just beautiful mountain back roads was just like, oh, I forgot I like this. There's a reason why I do this. Like literally, it was like, I was having this great fun on this trip. It was like it made me almost forget entirely how much why I liked riding. That trip also was the first time I learned the reason why you wear earplugs every time you ride was because it's the difference between getting off the bike and feeling like you've ran 10 marathons, or getting off the bike and okay, where are we going to dinner? I'd like a shower, maybe please. I'd like to get cleaned up before we go out, but all right, I'm good to go. Just huge in amounts of fatigue. So yeah, definitely was. Not being realistic on that trip with what we should have done, and using the right tool for the right job. Although I will say this, there'll never be to echo your earlier point, there's never a perfect trip, or there's never a perfect tool for the job. I mean, every motorcycle ride I do, adjust my gear, wear my summer jacket, my winter jacket, summer gloves, winter gloves, and I'll constantly think to myself, oh, I wish I had brought this piece of gear, or thrown on another layer, or oh, it's a little bit hot out. Maybe I should have taken the lighter jacket versus the heavier jacket, or what have you. So definitely a great example of it'll never be perfect. So just try it and do it.
Yeah. The ideal bike is happily sit at 100 miles an hour all day, carry your entire wardrobe, weigh 400 pounds, and and have just all the storage.
I'll say this: I'm a bit of a fanboy for my FJ09 because it's the ugliest bike I've seen in my life. But if it is not the perfect bike for my current needs, I keep thinking about since I've had it for 3-4 years now, and I'm like, do I want to sell this? Do I want to get something that's a little bit more character, a little bit more fun, a little faster, a little lighter, a little whatever? And honestly, for the stuff that I do, it's perfect. I mean, it'll happily cruise at 80 all day on the highway. It weighs, not 400 pounds, but you can fact check me, 440, I think, 445, something like that. So not a heavy bike by any means. It mounts good sport touring rubber, so you can handle pretty decently. The suspension's not awful. The only thing I'll say about it is that the throttle is really snatchy in the low end. But other than that, it's typically Yamaha or just anything that has throttle by wire just to meet emission standards. A lot of them have really, really snatchy throttles in the low end. But that triple motor is just a treat. It's nice and sedate when you want it to be, and it's hooligan when you want it to be.
Nice.
It's got for those in your audience that have not ever ridden a triple motor, they're fun. They've got almost the top end power of an inline 4, and they've got almost the grunt down low of a V-twin. And I'd say 80% of either. They're a great in between, and quite a lot of fun. And they make this really cool high pitched whine that you don't get in any other kind of bike.
Yeah, that's cool.
So big fanboy of that bike.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
And it's no one's ever heard of it.
Yeah, so it's is it like the sport touring version of the FZ?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
If I had to honestly, so I have the two bikes as I mentioned, the FJ09 and I'm pointing towards my garage because I'm from New Jersey and I talk with my hands. I have the FJ09 and I have the Triumph Bonneville, and if I had to downsize between the two of them, Yamaha actually makes a kind of sport classic version called the XSR 900. That's what I'd go with just to keep that motor.
Oh yeah.
And still get get my hipstery, tweed wearing, mustache twirling, hipster riding out of me.
Can you talk about the Bonneville a little bit?
Okay, I can absolutely talk about the Bonneville.
How much power does it make?
So,
that's an 860.
It's an 865 parallel twin. Less than you'd think, more than you need.
So it's because it's air cooled and it's carbureted, so it's kind of like a Harley situation where it's like big engine, not that much power.
Yeah. It makes decent power. I'll say this: it gets out of its
Mm-hmm.
own way. Um, and the bike actually, since it has a very nice, like a very short rake, a very nice standard seating position, and especially now that I've modified mine a little bit to fit my needs, I rejet the bike, remove the airbox, so that makes a little bit more power. I could not tell you how much more, but a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more. And I swapped out the suspension for a better suspension, and swapped out the tires for like some really good Michelins, and it handles well. It's a very compliant chassis. You won't be winning any stoplight races, but you on a twisty road, you will be surprised by what you can do in
Yeah.
it. I have in my area, it's kind of mostly traditional suburbs in my area, but we do have some kind of cool little twisty back road, hilly kind of areas that are actually quite nice since they overlook the Atlantic Ocean, the bay. You can see New York City in the distance. Very pretty. But whenever I start riding with someone for the first time, my kind of go-to ride is a nice little half-hour loop that hits on all these kind of twisty roads. And last year, I ran into a high school classmate of mine that I hadn't seen since high school. Caught up with him a little bit. Noticed he was wearing a motorcycle jacket. I said, "Oh, you ride?" He's like, "Yeah, I do." So I'm like, "Dude, let's ride." Take him on this little twisty back road ride, and I won't say I'm a fast rider because I really am not. But this particular road, I do know it like the back of my hand. This particular bike, my Bonneville, I know like the back of my hand. And I was going to what I thought was kind of slow. I even said to him like, "Hey, if you haven't been on this road before, like this actually has some blind corners and gets pretty tight and twisty. Um, Ride at your own pace. Don't try to keep up with me." And even with that, I was trying to go slow, and got at the end of the bike, at the end of the road, and the guy comes up to me almost like shaking. He's like, "Dude, that was scary as hell. Like, what were you doing there?" I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Having fun." I'm also convinced they put up a radar speed detector there. The speed limit is only about 25 miles an hour, and it's one of the ones that flashes and shows your
Mm-hmm.
speed. And not that I'm going hooligan speeds 80 miles an hour on there, but there's also a bunch of between that sign and a bunch of slow down, 25 is 25 signs all over the road. So I might be responsible for a few of those. For legal reasons, that was a joke.
Yes. That sounds like a lot of fun. I think that's an element I think a lot of people, not even necessarily new riders, but a lot of people don't appreciate that, like knowing a bike and kind of knowing your own limits is one of those things that
No,
really
absolutely.
plays in more than a fast bike.
One of the scariest situations I had on a bike was not necessarily on any kind of a scary bike. Big dealer by me did a demo day. I think it was a Suzuki demo day. And I hopped on I believe it was a DRZ 400
Mm-hmm.
SM, so the big single cylinder dual sport, but with the Supermoto tires and brakes and everything. And just, I went around a corner and just did not understand that bike. And especially if you're not used to
Mm-hmm.
a Supermoto or a dual sport, I mean, they're very pogo
Yeah,
sticky.
yeah, very high.
So just, I think I just tapped the brakes a little bit to slow down. On my Bonneville, like where I could tap the brakes and slow down a little bit, it just
Yeah.
total front end dive. So yeah, no, absolutely. Knowing your bike is absolutely paramount.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, the Bonneville, like I said, if unabashed Triumph fanboy, I have actually Triumph literally in my blood and in my veins. My I found this. Of course, I didn't find this out until. So unfortunately, my grandfather died in about 2 months before I bought my
Mm-hmm.
Bonneville, and then as I bought it and brought it home, my grandmother told me, "Oh, Ralph, my grandfather, he had a Triumph when he was stationed in England in the 1950s. So he was with the U.S. Air Force, stationed over there as a bomber mechanic. And I found out that he actually had a Triumph TR6, I believe, the predecessor to the Bonneville. Since the Bonneville, I don't believe was introduced until '58, and I should know that. So I did. I told my grandmother, like, if you ever find photo, grandpa on the motorcycle, like, please, please, please let me have that. Fortunately, she never did, but when we were cleaning out her house before we moved her to an assisted living facility, we did find some very cool things, and that's why I got up for a second to show them, because these are some really cool things. So we found this one's very cool. I don't know if you'll be able to see this at all, but a traffic ticket for driving up a one-way street in Norfolk, England.
That's so cool that you kept that.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it says. I think it was just a summons to appear in court. It doesn't say how many pounds it is. But yeah, went up a one-way street and definitely got in trouble for that. We found so he was released from active duty and came back and sold he was trying to sell the bike, so he had the power of attorney to let his friend sell the bike for him. Unfortunately, his friend, we then found out, wrapped the bike around a tree. Friend was okay, but the bike was not. And then we found these, which are very cool, the riding club that he belonged to.
Oh, wow. That's so neat.
Tornadoes was he was the mechanic for the B-58 Tornado, which was a very cool early nuclear bomber in the 1950s. At RAF Sculthorpe in England. It's for if we have any Limeys in our audience, it's near Norfolk, which is like north and east of London. I actually got those scanned and made into some modern stickers.
Nice.
Unfortunately, the scan wasn't perfect, but it is quite a bit, still pretty cool. And with however many that I have, I plastered them in any sticker or any surface that I could get my hands on, including on the side covers of my Bonneville, saying, my grandpa rides with me. And then this was very cool, the original instruction manual.
Wow. That's very cool.
Yeah, so for the gearheads in the audience, this is actually one of the coolest things that I've ever seen. I mean, absolutely beautiful illustrations and things like that, and it is written in the most like just absurdly British manner possible.
Don't accelerate too fast; you'll get out of sorts.
If I may, if you may give me a moment, so please entertain the audience with your thoughts on this while I search for this and use a very, very bad British accent.
This will be fun.
I need to find the running in, so this will take me a moment.
Pull a reverse
yes.
or a Hugh Laurie.
For many years, motorcyclists were advised to ride the new machines in a speed not in excess of 30 miles per hour for the first 1,000 miles. With a modern machine of high or comparatively high performance, this type of running in is entirely useless, and at the end of the 1,000 miles, only very little bit of improvement will have been effected in the bearing surfaces of the engine. Running in should be carried out progressively, and it is necessary for the rider to make what may be termed a very definitive arrangement with himself before he starts riding the new machine. He should make up his mind never to be bustled during the running in period, and to ride at his own speed, entirely irrespective of the speed of other traffic. It is, naturally, annoying when one's own high-performance machine is passed on the open road by a lightweight, but the rider with a new model must control his impulses, happy in the thought that the treatment he is giving his engine will mean a considerably improved performance at the end of the running-in period. Now, on a modern bike, I'll actually disagree with that advice, since you actually should kind of make sure you're varying your engine speed and actually breaking it in a little bit hard. Nothing too, full wango tango, but you should bed those piston rings in. But it is the most British thing I've read in my life.
That's hilarious.
I've led this thing cover to cover, and it's absolutely wonderful.
That's a great nighttime reading.
It is. It is. I pour myself. I put on Rule Britannia, and I pour myself a cup of Earl Grey every time I read this.
That's fantastic. I love how much work they used to put into those just like basic pamphlets that you'd get with a bike.
Oh, absolutely absurd.
It's like, change your oil. Go to the dealership to get your oil changed every like XX miles.
Oh, I think the oil change interval was literally something like 1,000 miles too.
Here.
Yeah.
Would be less than a month for me.
I just saw. Oh, the oil should be changed at 250, 500, and 1,000 miles during the running-in period, and thereafter every 1,500 miles regularly. I mean, this is like some 1950s like soup before they had kind of modern engineering and things like that. So you kind of did have to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But no, that was very cool that I found that. I mean, I do have I won't say I'm entirely a Triumph fanboy. I actually wanted to point that out in your last episode. You I think it was Mike made a joke about no one is a Yamaha fanboy and gets that excited by a particular model. Like they're just like, oh, that R6 looks cool. I'll buy that Yamaha. But I actually took a little bit of offense to that because right now the current object of my lust is another Yamaha. So I did take a little, I know I'm known for being a Triumph fanboy, but Yamaha also has my fancy. Gotta love a company that can make, anything from, outboard motors to motorcycles, which I guess those are, relatively small
Mhm.
engine, kind of similar to, trumpets.
Yeah. That's why they're so good
You
at
think
exhaust notes.
well, you think their exhaust would sound better if that was the
Yeah.
case. Um, No, but right now, my kind of object of desire, I started this past year getting into dirt a little bit whenever I could borrow a dirt bike. And then also just with my cars, off-roading a little bit in my truck. Um, so that coincided quite nicely with the release of the Tenere 700,
Those are good
which
bikes.
to me is just, they've heard great things about them. I mean, Yamaha definitely took their time. I mean, they put a teaser out about it and took 2.5, 3 years to release it in the North American market, and just took forever. But from what I've seen, they do seem to be very, it's a very proven motor. The Yamaha MT-07/FZ07 is a great motor, great mid-size, competitor to the SV650, things like that. They took that, they kept it pretty lightweight. They gave it a pretty long travel suspension, a lot of ground clearance, uh, and it seems to be a great do-it-all, dual sport adventure bike. I mean, I saw that, and with my love of touring, I saw, I could take that down to West Virginia and go ride the Hatfield and McCoy trails, or down to Tennessee and do the Trans-American Trail, and not hate
Mm.
either the ride down there or the ride on the trail.
Yeah.
I could certainly find a better tool for each of those jobs, but not many that could do both of those jobs pretty admirably.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of a gap in me and Michael's knowledge is with like the dual sports segment. I could definitely see how that's a strength with those brands because that Kawasaki also has the Versas, and those are very solid bikes too for
Mhm.
kind of do it all.
Yes and no. I've ridden one or two of the bigger Versas. I haven't ridden the 300, which I've heard is a little bit better off road because it's so light. The big Versas, it's similar to my Yamaha FJ09 or a maybe a Suzuki V-Strom, where you can take it off road and you can adapt it to take it off road if you throw some money
Mm.
at it. Put a bigger skid plate on it, some knobbier tires. But there's better tools for the
It's more
job.
of a street bike that can go off road.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
My FJ absolutely is not. It looks like an adventure bike, but it absolutely is not one that can go down anything other than a well-graded dirt road that you would take a Honda Civic down. Um, on it, it has these big, beautiful triple headers that are coming off the front of the engine. That just, if you look at it, I think it's something like 4.5 inches of ground clearance, like nothing at all.
Yeah.
For comparison's sake, my friend that I'm actually doing my trip, leaving tomorrow on down to Kentucky, or sorry, from Kentucky down to West Virginia, Tennessee, has a Yamaha FZ 6R, a Phaser 6, which is kind of the more relaxed sport bike with an inline four. And we actually looked it up, and it actually had about a half inch of ground clearance greater than my FJ09. So a sport bike had more ground clearance than mine.
That's great.
Yeah. Ended up once chasing a guy and a friend of mine on a dual sport, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that can go off road, right?" And I'm like, "Not really. It can go down a dirt road." He's like, "Okay, we'll go down this
Can
road."
or should.
Guy ends up taking us like off road, and like not even like on an actual road. Like he was trying to have me go down like it was banked to the side. I mean, not that steeply, but steeply banked to the side, like grass, wet grass. And I just stopped, and I'm like, he was on a big, I think it was an XSR 650 or XR 650, the big Honda dual sport, big knobby tires. And he's like, "Dude, what?" I'm like, "I'll die if I go on that. I'm not going on that. Like, are you kidding me? Look at my tires. I've Pilot Road 5s on this bike. Like, I will die if I go on there."
God.
Yeah. No, so I'm definitely going back and forth with my advice of, well, you could do a lot more with what you have than you think. But then sometimes it's like you're not even bringing a gun to a knife fight there. You're bringing you're bringing a spoon to a gunfight.
Yeah, I think like part of it is if the experience is there, I think it's probably worth having the experience, but also just be aware that like if you're taking the worst tool for the job, then you're probably gonna just be prepared for that.
You're doing brain surgery with a hammer and a butter knife.
Better than what the caveman had.
That is true. Bonk. Actually, one thing that I've kind of also learned through very painful trial and error is to embrace the shoulder seasons, especially for
Mm.
touring. Um, Trying to do a April or May trip is typically going to be a lot better for you than trying to do in the heat of the summer. Last year, he and actually the same guy, Chris and I, did a similar trip, met up in Morgantown, but this time went north primarily, up to the Great Lakes and up to Niagara Falls. And the entire week was just, 90 plus degrees, just dying, especially because those parts of the country, people, you think of, the Northeast and you think it's not that hot in the summer, but it can get very muggy. And if you get a heat wave, it can just be completely awful. Ended up going up to Niagara Falls and coming back, and I ended up having to ride all the way from central Pennsylvania back home, in the morning from Niagara Falls to central Pennsylvania, and then we split up, went our separate ways, and I had about a 4.5, 5 hour ride back home in it was over 100 degrees. It got so hot that the LCD speedometer on my FJ09 started malfunctioning.
Oh, dear.
Like I could still see the speed, but the LCD started kind of cooking and kind of coming out, so they were somewhat like filled in. I'm just like, oh no, this ain't bad. This ain't good. I ended up. I ride with a Camelback most of the time. So you can just kind of stick it underneath the thing when you have a nice little stretch of road. Drink some water, just keep going on. And I had completely run out of water. I'm just was at a bad stretch of highway where there wasn't a single gas station that I could see for what felt like an eternity. I think it actually was around 25 minutes. But when you're 25 minutes and 100 degrees and miserable, that 25 minutes is an eternity. Ended up finding a gas station, went in, bought a big bottle of water, got a big cup of ice, bought myself a big Gatorade, drank basically as much water and Gatorade as I could, filled my Camelback up with ice and Gatorade and everything too. And I still had like maybe about a pint of water left, and I'm like, I've already, soaked my shirt, put on my bandana around my neck, which, by the way, life pro tip, if you are riding in the heat, a bandana or a neck gaiter that is just soaked in water underneath into your jacket is like your own personal air conditioning for around, depending on how hot it is and how well your jacket ventilates, half hour to 45 minutes, but is, a very good tool for keeping yourself cool. During the trip. But anyway, I'd done that already. I'd done everything that I needed to. I think I literally just took my shirt off and just put it in the sink. I'm pretty sure. Just completely just soak it. And I'm like, what do I do with the rest of this water? I don't really have space in my backpack. So I was like, it was still like ice cold water because it just come out of the thing. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to pour this in my pockets. So I just stood up. I was wearing my what are called Revit Alphacinos. They're like a Cordura riding pant that look like a pair of khakis. And I literally just opened up my pocket, just bloop, bloop, just to get some more water and on my, that would be cooled by the airflow. And they dried out in about 10 minutes. That evening I got home, and my significant other, my girlfriend, was sitting in the front yard watering the plants, and I was literally like, just hose me down, just hose me down. Looks like the beginning of Rambo 1: First Blood.
Yeah. God.
But yeah, it was. I definitely learned my lesson to embrace the shoulder seasons. Riding in the late spring or riding in the fall can actually be much more pleasant than riding in the heat of the summer.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's one of those things you'd think like. It'd be better to not have to deal with much of a chance of rain or anything, but that definitely seems like it could be miserable in its own right.
Yeah. Although, to be honest, I mean, if you get a huge rainstorm, you get a huge rainstorm. It doesn't matter what time of year it is, but much easier to ride through kind of a steady, gentle rain than it is to ride through, a violent. We get in the northeastern half of the country, we get really violent summer thunderstorms. Much easier to ride through, a nice gentle rain than a violent thunderstorm. Even if the gentle rain is going to be there all day. I mean, especially if you have a bike with good tires, good rain gear, you can get through much more than you think.
True.
But big thunderstorm like that, there's no running. There is running from that actually. There's no escaping that if you're in it, but there's running from it. I've had a few instances, especially up in the mountains, where you can see a thunderstorm way off in the distance. And we successfully ran from it, see, it's going north and east, and if we drop, due south, it'll kind of pass us by.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, we were in somewhere near Charlottesville, Virginia. Couldn't tell you exactly where. We stopped for lunch at a restaurant, and we were kind of taking I-81 up north. And as one friend decided to go and do his business in the bathroom, and the running joke with this guy is that when he had to go do that, it would take quite a while. He was one of those. And we saw just this huge just mass on the radar of just red and purple evil just heading our way, coming in from the west, and we were heading northeast. So we ended up having to grab him literally almost out of the bathroom, hop on the bikes, and the entire time. So on I-81 in like that part of Virginia, you're basically on top of the Blue Ridge Mountains, but like up on top of the ridge. So we could see just everything on either side of us for miles and miles and miles. And we just saw this huge, huge thunderstorms that were just coming in this way. And I was just like, we need to go faster. We need to go faster. We need to get ahead of this.
Like, not chasing the storm, but running away from the storm.
Trying to get ahead of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds wild.
Since, yeah. That can, as I mentioned earlier, being sounding like a broken record here about this, but being fluid with your plans is definitely a skill when you're on a big trip like that.
Yeah.
So I had another thing that I wanted to talk about, and since you started riding a few years ago, I wanted to kind of see what your thoughts were on this. So this is a kind of thing that I've done a few times over the years. Since I'm obsessed with motorcycling. I love growing the sport. I love trying to be more inclusive in the riding and get more friends to ride, since I've had so many good experiences with it, and it's been a constant source of joy in my life. So I call it baptizing someone in motor oil. It's been my running joke about this one. Whenever I have a friend that is, I'm a little bit interested in riding, I'd always love to do that, and I'm like, literally a weekend MSF course is all you need to do. And then I'm not the be all end all. Clearly I don't have any kind of a motorcycle wizard beard, but I know a good amount about riding, and I literally, any of my friends that want to get into it, I say, I will help you look at bikes. I will help you pick out gear. I'll help you get set up. Once you do get a bike and you do get set up, I have a spare Sena headset. I'll go take you for some rides, because your first ride can be intimidating, even if it's just going from your house to the convenience store a mile down the road. And I've done this, many times with some of my friends, and I'm doing it right now with two of my friends that are both at the point where they both completed their MSF course, got their licenses, and are looking for bikes. So I wanted to see your thoughts on that. Like, what would you have done if would you have had a better experience with your beginner riding period if you had a friend like that was willing to do that, or am I overdoing it?
Well, my experience is very unique. I haven't shared this a lot on my channel before, but I like dipped my feet in the kiddie pool, as it were, and I had 250cc scooters, and I had two of them. Yeah, I had a Metropolitan,
two separate 50cc scooters,
which is a rare purchasing experience, but I had a Metropolitan 50, and then I had a Honda Aero 50, which was from '85. And
the real square
looking
ones?
Yeah, super like 80s
I know
style.
the ones you're talking about.
And honestly, that taught me so much about riding. Like, just because you could say, do a real bike and all that stuff, but you do learn a lot about like, first of all, just being aware of your surroundings, and then things like cornering and all this stuff. And you need to maintain your speed on those, so you kind of learn braking and cornering and all that sort of stuff. And then from there, I had a 250, and
especially with very tiny little tires, you can they carry their momentum, and you can turn in real quickly on them.
You learn a lot that way.
The first street legal bike I ever rode was a Vespa 150. Yeah, my aunt, who I'm very close with, has a beautiful little Vespa 150 named Luigi, and
that's hilarious.
And here's the thing: is like when she said that, and I was like, "Oh, are you gonna get a matching red one named Mario?" And she looked at me like I had three heads, and I'm like,
"Come on now."
And I'm like, you were like 19 when like Super Mario came out. Like, you can't tell me that you weren't at least vaguely aware of this.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, I think I'm a big supporter of just like starting on as small of a bike as you're comfortable on, because you do get, and on a 50cc, I just had to find the path that was, suitable for me to get to college. That's what I did. But honestly, from there, I got a 250, which was like, it was a very large 250. I think it was getting up to like 400 pounds. It was a very large bike for that size.
Was it a Suzuki Bergman or
it
something?
was a Honda Reflex. and yeah, it was a
Okay.
big yellow one, and so that was like kind of intimidating at first, but like after just a few decent rides, it was just like, oh, it just makes sense. And then from there, and the PC 800, it was pretty much just like, oh, this is kind of big, but then it was like, okay, I got the hang of this. And I think you're always going to have that adjustment period, but I think the hardest part is just kind of getting on a bike in the first place and learning those skills.
I'm very much a fan of small
Mm-hmm.
bikes, but I'm not a huge fan of just you have to start on a 250 or a 300. If you're it honestly, I think it depends on the person and who they are. And like I was saying, like, so I'm in my early 30s now, and I have a friend that's also similarly in his early 30s. I would be more comfortable saying to him, yeah, you can probably start on a 500. Actually, the bike I'm looking to trying to convince him to get on is a CB500F, much like what you recently
Yeah,
purchased.
same bike.
Because I know that that bike won't have too much power to kill
Mm-hmm.
him. It's not going to be like a 600 where when you crack it above 600 RPM or 6,000 RPMs, the power just grows
Mm.
crazy exponentially. But it'll also let you do a little bit more with it than you would be able to do with the 250 or such. That being said, I'm also still a big fan of tiny bikes. My current object of desire, because I just found out that they actually made these. I've desperately wanted a smaller vintage Honda
Mm-hmm.
CB. Particularly like they made some really tiny four cylinders. I just found out actually I was actually riding the other day to run some errands, and I was listening to a motorcycle podcast that I listened to called the False Neutral,
Oh, okay.
which is basically a bunch of older guys just sitting around talking about the crazy engine swaps and stuff that they're doing in their shops, since they're all engineers and things like that. Apparently, Honda made a CB350F, in the 70s, so in the mid 70s, a 350cc inline four, which to me just revs to 10,000 RPMs, has that vintage charm and classic. I don't even care how that rides. Like that just sounds way
Oh,
too
yeah.
cool. So that's my current object of desire that I'm trying to find. Unfortunately, most of at least in the Northeast, it's Brooklyn and Philadelphia, the hipster areas. You see a ton for sale, but they'll just have been
Cafe racers. Yeah.
bad cafe racered out. It's just like, ugh, I don't want to ride
Yeah,
that.
that's a
Or
shame.
just complete basket
Mm-hmm.
cases where it's just, uh, I don't want to just have to do a complete frame up restoration on a bike. I don't mind doing some work, but like, I don't want to do a frame up restoration on a bike.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you see a lot of people. I met tons of people, and like they're like, oh, I'm gonna do like if it's like a Street Fighter or like Cafe Racer and that kind of stuff, and they kind of get like, oh, it's so cool and all this stuff. But like because I've been like buying and reselling bikes for a few years now, and the best thing that you can do is get a bike to look as stock as possible and just to run as smooth as possible. Like that's from selling a lot of bikes. It's not because you have a cool shift lever on it. It's because the bike looks like it hasn't been ridden by someone who's a
Yeah.
moron.
Yeah, adult owned is one of the best things you can see. Unfortunately, most adults don't actually live up to that
Mm.
moniker.
But
But
it's wearing the
no.
suit that is a responsible rider, at least.
But yeah, with my friend Eric, the one I mentioned earlier, he has a 1982 Honda CB750 that we had found that was owned by an old man who is now in his 80s, or maybe dead by now. He's owned the bike for about 5 years now, so for all I know. But at the time, he was owned by a guy in his 80s that had owned it since new. Was not completely stock, but with period, like he put on a little bit of an exhaust in
Mm-hmm.
1984. So it was still very beautiful. Had actually been recently, about 5 years prior to that, repainted, so it's just beautiful
Wow.
cherry red with gold pinstriping, like absolutely beautiful. And then when he decided he wanted to get rid of it, what did he do? He didn't put it on Craigslist or anything like that. No, he took it to this guy who runs a little tiny, like out of his one car garage motorcycle repair shop that specializes in Honda CBs. Russian guy
Mm-hmm.
too, so he's hey, come in, accent and everything. And had the bike completely. Every bit of rubber had been replaced on the bike, so the bike was running like an absolute champ. My friend Eric, I actually found the bike for him on Craigslist, sent it to him since he had been riding for a while. He had your bike's adventure brother. He had a Honda CB500X, which great bike, but again, the problem with adventure bikes is they're ugly as sin.
Yes.
Um, he had just fallen in love with Honda CB, like old Honda CBs and UJMs. I see this bike. I sent it to him. I unfortunately couldn't look at it with him. He goes and looks at it, and he says, "Jake, I need you to come look at this bike because right now I have goo eyes. Like I can't see any flaws in this bike, and I'm just in love with it because it is absolutely a gorgeous bike." Um, I go and I check it out with him, and I literally said to him, "I'm like, if you don't buy this bike, I will." I think it was $3,000 for a just absolutely mint. I think around 12,000 mile, but like completely redone. Just I wouldn't say concourse or show ready, but absolute head turner of a bike. So we have a standing agreement, Eric and I, that if come illness, death, or female influence, that we are no longer able to ride, that we have to, or if we just have to sell the bikes for whatever reason, that we each get on my Bonneville and on his CB, we each get right of first purchase. It's our blood oath.
That's funny. Man, that's really cool though. Yeah, those old bikes are. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about old bikes? Like, aside from the googly eyes on the CBs, like, what do you think about them?
I'd say this: it's great having so not that my Bonneville is that old; it's 2007, but it is old enough and simple enough where it's carbureted, manual throttle bodies. Just the most advanced piece of electronics on that bike is the turn signal relay. It's old enough to have old bike problems. I have to be really worried about it in the spring because it'll be real cranky from sitting with old gas in it, even if I stabilize it and everything. Cleaning out the carbs, things like that. It's a great feeling to have an old bike for when you want to get the raw feeling of having, especially with like something with a mechanical throttle body. Just is a joy to ride, just how direct and how fun it is. And it's great to have a bike like that when everything is running perfectly great. And it is also great to have a bike that you don't have to worry about if it's below 60 degrees. Is this going to start or not? Fuel injection is a wonderful invention.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm appreciating that very much now.
N+1 is the correct number of bikes to have in your garage. Having at least a 2-bike garage is a good problem to have. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's really, and the crazy thing about it too is like it does seem like a very like higher class thing to have. Oh, I've got my weekend bike and my grocery getting bike, but it's like, I mean, if you're doing work on them and everything.
Fortunately, in your case, your grocery getting bike, which would be the bike that's actually a car, your PCH 800, unfortunately, is also your weekend bike because it never runs.
Yeah,
it's been a basket case.
The hammer on, but like it's really if you wanted to get into the 2-bike life, it's really not bad because like, yeah, you're gonna be ponying up a few grand, but if you're actually like repairing stuff, like you can probably just end up making money on the other one, and then you just kind of have this like circular flow of bikes and having equity in your garage, provided you don't destroy one of them.
Especially right now, the price of bikes is crazy. With COVID and like I went to the we have a big dealer by me that basically sells everything under the sun minus Yamaha. So they sell the other big 3: Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki. Ducati, BMW, Aprilia, and then they have a full used section as well on top of that. There's anything under the sun. It's like a crazy 4-building type situation where they have a bunch of different buildings where you can go in to see the different bikes and everything like that. And I went in there and I was, Triumph as well too. And some of the shops I was shocked to see, like some of the areas, like just how few bikes they had in stock. In the Ducati section, they had like 4 bikes total, where they normally would have maybe 25, mostly like street scramblers and things like that, but just absolutely nothing. The Honda section, which is its own building, literally had a very sad, like, single little kid's dirt bike. I think it had a single monkey with a sold sign on it, which, by the way, Honda monkey, other object of my current bike desire. And then like a single, a big 600 or 800 Shadow. I forget the exact. I think it was a CT750 Shadow, 750cc Shadow. So like 3 bikes in a room that normally in normal times would have stored 25, 30. Mm-hmm. So it's just with just nothing new being made or very few being on the shelves. I've seen the price of the used bikes just absolutely skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. I was looking right now for my one friend, Carlos, that as I mentioned earlier, I'm baptizing in motor oil. I've been looking for a Honda Rebel 500 for him or 300 for him, and we can't find one for under $4,000. It's absolutely insane.
Oh yeah, I've seen that too. Because I was kind of curious about those. I like the Rebel 500s, but I think I got a pretty good deal on my CB 500. But when I was selling my Rebel 250 that I restored, I had people, I had tons of people interested, and I had two people came over and they were like, I was trying to wait because somebody was trying to trade me a Grom for it, and I was like, well, why the hell not? But they were like, I can't, I've seen these for like $3,000 and like close to $3,000, and I'm like, I just told them like that's too much for these. Like these are not worth $3,000. Like mine's in good condition. I've fixed a bunch of stuff. It's not worth $3,000. Like I'm not changing my price. Like. All right. Well, I think we're about wrapping up here. I'd like to sign off with what would be your infinite money bike right now, and let's exclude the previous mentions.
My infinite money bike. Single bike?
Single bike.
And I have my current lineup?
Sure.
Honestly, nothing too nuts. I would like a really comfy Goldwing.
Ooh.
I would drop like $25,000 on it, get it completely optioned out. Nice comfy seats. I really desperately want to get my significant other into long distance riding with me. She likes to ride with me. As I call them, ice cream rides. Like, let's go ride down to the town next to us to go get ice cream and go walk around the beach. But to be like, hey, honey, like, let's go visit my sister in Florida. We'll be there in 2 days. Like, that would be cool to be able to share some of these experiences with her.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, on a little buzzy Yamaha, the Bonneville is a great 2-up riding bike since it has a nice flat banana seat, as I call it. But not even just around town, 40 miles an hour trying to get up some hills. It's like, oh, you are running out of breath, sir. So yeah, nice big comfy Goldwing I think would be my unlimited money bike.
Nice.
What would yours be?
See, I was actually going to go in that direction too, and I feel like it might be a bit boring to say the same thing. I'd like to have a Goldwing. I think what would probably make the most sense that I would not spend money on it. It'd be just like a really good adventure bike for my area.
Honestly, Honda Africa Twin. I know you're a Honda fanboy. I've heard they're not great on road, but they're very good off road.
Yeah, well, it's been a lot of fun having you on here, Jake. I'd like to have you on another time.
Thank you.
And a lot of great stories. We're going to wrap up there. Thanks again for watching another episode. Any closing comments, Jake?
Ride safe, ride smart, and don't be afraid to get wet, get dirty, get cold, get hot. You can do more than you think you can.
Absolutely. At Gat, but have fun.
At Cat, absolutely, but have fun.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jake.